So tonight's topic is about the challenge of the week in the dojo, which is forgiveness. And I think this, like a lot of our topics, seems like a bizarre thing to be talking about in martial arts, in a martial arts school. But forgiveness is incredibly important. And on some level, it's like so much of the things that we talk about, which is about not being attached. It's about being free of attachment to these things that we're so unable to forgive. And there are a couple of different ways that I want to go with this, but I've been asking people if they've been doing the challenge of the week. Nobody has said yes. People know what it is, but there's a very big difference between knowing that you're supposed to forgive somebody and actually forgiving somebody. And I've had a couple of good questions about it as well. So I'm going to refer every once in a while to my notes in this book, which has a great thing on it. The first thing I want to talk about is about my very serious injury, which doesn't seem like a very serious injury, but if you looked at it, they would flag this video. They'd remove it from the internet if you looked up close, because it is disgusting. So I was walking upstairs in a bit of a hurry yesterday, and my sandals got stuck underneath, and my toe didn't make it, and so it went right there, and then it just slipped back down. And if you've ever had your toenail bend up backwards like that, you know it's the most horrific thing that can possibly happen. You catch a glimpse of what's underneath your toenail, and you think that's something that human eyes were never meant to see. It is so gory and gross. And as soon as it happened, I looked at it, and part of me wanted to just faint, and then the part of me that's in charge and is like Sifu mode, I just pushed it back down and kept walking. And it kills. It's like a little bit pussy and turning weird colors, and it's all puffed up, and it's really terrible. So it made me think of a couple of different things. One is that when we are wronged, when somebody does something to us, it feels very much like, or we treat it very much like it's an actual physical injury. It's like we have a scar, or like we have the pain that we're kind of carrying around with us. Like we have this reminder that's constantly telling us, don't forgive this person. You have to keep thinking about it. Don't forget to be pissed off at them. And it makes sense if you have a physical injury like I do, a debilitating, horrifying injury like a busted toenail, that you want to keep thinking about it, because if I ignore it, then I do something dumb, like, touch anything with it, and am met with instant searing pain. And if I'm not really careful with it, I'm sure I'm going to get an infection, and the toe's going to fall off, and then you're going to, have to just use your imagination when I'm demonstrating front kicks. But if it's not a physical injury that can actually be made worse like that, we do have the option of just immediately letting it go. This is not usually what we choose to do. We usually choose to hold on to it like it's a festering, infected toenail that we really have to hold on to. But it's certainly also true that if the thing that there is to forgive is serious enough and devastating enough, that can last far longer, depending on how we respond to it, than a physical injury will. And Sifu Brown used to say all the time back in Michigan, when you're practicing with your partner, and if you accidentally hit them, or you purposefully hit them when you're not supposed to, they might get bruised, they might get banged up, but the mental and emotional scars are going to last way longer than the physical damage. And that's not because it's the way that it must be, it's because of the way that we just happen to deal with it. We get hurt, physically or mentally, and we hold on to it. And this is the way that our brains are designed. is to not let that keep happening to us, right? It's important to remember it. And when I say forgive, when I talk about the importance of forgiveness, I'm not necessarily saying that you need to forget this thing that this person did. I will tell you, I will never in my life forget that stair. I will think of that every single time I walk up any stair for the rest of my life. I'm going to think, oh, that one time that I didn't make it all the way over. And I might never wear sandals again. But the fact that you can remember something does not preclude you from being able to forgive and being able to be unattached. It's like kind of a selective attachment that we want. We want to be able to remember it when it's useful, and when it's not useful, we want to let it go. And this is not what we tend to do with anything. We've got whatever those things are that get stuck in our head, we hold on to it. We hold on to it with a death grip, like if I don't remember this terrible thing forever, that it's going to keep happening to me again. The truth is, it's probably not. And if you remember it enough to actually do something about it, then you're not going to have to worry about it at all. That's not what we do. So try to remember that this is something that is, if it's not a physical injury and you're not getting that constant pain, you don't actually need to be thinking about it all the time, and you can choose just in that long to let it go and to just completely forgive that person. And that is, again, more for us than it is for the other person. When we refuse to forgive somebody, it's really ourselves that we're torturing by continuing to drag this through our days, and by kind of stressing about it and having this anxiety about it. There's this wonderful part of this book, The Way of Chuang Tzu, that we have in the dojo, that I have referenced at least one other time in meditation. And so I want to talk about this chapter. It's called The Empty Boat. And this is not actually like the deepest, most important part of this chapter, but it's the part that I remember because it's right on my level. It's nice and easy. So it says, if a man is crossing a river and an empty boat collides with his own skiff, even though he be a bad-tempered man, he will not become very angry. But if he sees a man in the boat, he will shout at him to steer clear. If the shout is not heard, he will shout again and yet again and begin cursing. And all because there's somebody in the boat. Yet if the boat were empty, he would not be shouting and not angry. And like, just as it would not make any sense for me to be angry at the step, which is just there doing what it does, it wouldn't make sense to be angry at an unmanned boat that we run into on the river, or a driverless car. You can get angry all you want at the car, but there's actually nothing there. There's nobody who's going to listen to you be angry. You can flip at the bird and it still just keeps doing what it does. But it's just so funny how like our egos respond to egos in that way. And when you recognize that, in this analogy of an empty boat running into it, I think is so perfect with this, because when you recognize that this is just purely about my ego recognizing and needing to respond to another ego, then you realize how silly it is. Because first, we don't want to always be in this ego state. We don't want to let our ego be the one driving and the one in charge. We want to allow ourselves to, be connected with that something that's deeper, that something that's higher. He goes on to talk about how our goal is to empty our own boat. And he describes the perfect person, the perfect man, as somebody who's able to do this, that, and then at the end, it's just like to have an empty boat, to be an empty boat. And it's because if you can do that, then everything else is a lot easier. Other people's egos will not be responding to your ego if it's not there, or if it's not, facing front. So this brings me to one of the greatest questions that I had this week. Last night, one of our senior students asked me about forgiveness. Well, what do you do when there's something to forgive, there's something that somebody's done, there's something that you're upset about, but you're concerned that this person is just going to keep doing it. You're worried that this person is going to keep walking all over you or do it to other people. And this morning somebody asked me about, what if that person is an axe murderer and you don't just want to let it go because they're going to go murder somebody else? Or, whatever like that. They might not be axe murdering people. They might just be verbally or emotionally abusing them. But this is certainly something to be aware of. And my answer to this that I'm giving today is that forgiveness does not mean that you just let that person continue doing what they were doing. You can totally forgive somebody and yet still take some kind of action. So the forgiveness again is for me. And then when I verbalize it to the other person, then it's for them and it does something over there on their end. But I'm not forgiving the other person because I'm doing them a favor. I'm doing myself a favor. And really this is about getting to a place of emptiness, getting to a place that is beyond ego. Because that's what we're talking about when we're talking about emptying your boat. If you're walking around with your ego always in charge and you're always bumping into other boats, you're going to be, angry, and other people are going to be angry at you. But if you bump into somebody, let's just say literally you're at the store and you bump into somebody and they look at you and you look at them and both of you are right there with ego, there is no chance of that going any other way than somebody gets upset. Whether or not you say something about it or whether or not it turns into something bigger, at least somebody is upset. But if you bump into somebody and there's no ego on your end, and they look at you and there's nothing for them, there's no ego for their ego to latch onto and to fight against, then it was just a physical thing. It's like you bumped into a post. Turning and getting upset at the post does you no good, and it's laughable to think that you would do that. So why do we do that with other people? Because how we're always kind of in that ego state. So the point that I was making last night and that I'll make tonight is, if you're going to have the best effectiveness when it's time to actually have a conversation with somebody who you're concerned about, they're going to keep doing this thing. That person who you're thinking, I don't want to forgive them because I don't want them to keep doing it, then this is the way to go about that conversation. If you enter into that conversation from the ego, if you enter into that conversation with even the tiniest sliver of yourself that's attached to how you were wronged and how you feel upset about it, and how you have your agenda in that conversation, then that person can smell that from a mile away. And you guys have all had a conversation like this with somebody where they're trying to tell you something that they might genuinely think is very helpful. This is great information that you need to know. But if we can sense that they're judging us, if we can sense that they're making it on some level about themselves, you don't listen to what they say. You're hearing the words, but you're the whole time going in your head, this is all you trying to tell me what to do. This is more about you than it is about me. I don't have to listen to this. And that's exactly what everybody else does when you do the same thing to them. But if we can empty our boat and truly forgive, enter into the conversation from a place of nothingness, it does not matter what I want. It does not matter what I need at all. It's not about me. It's purely about them. Well, everybody loves having a conversation about that. Anybody who you're going to have a conversation with where they can tell it's really all about them, it's all about what they need, it's all about what's best for them, it's all about what they want, then they're going to be right there with you. They're going to listen to you. They're going to listen to you so intently. And better yet, the things that you're going to say are going to be effortless and perfect, because it's not coming from ego, because it's not coming from you, because it's coming from just that. You are like a direct channel from, from God, the universe, from that deeper self. And that's magic. If you've had a conversation like that, you've been seriously touched on a deep level. You've been changed and transformed. And this is what forgiveness can give us, is the opportunity for ourselves to be free and the opportunity to be that way for somebody else. And when you can do that, it's like the greatest feeling. And I would love to say that this is who I am all the time, but the truth is that it's when I think about it and I realize, oh yeah, that initial reaction that I have to be pissed and be ego forward is not going to help the situation. I've got to actually take a step back, take a deep breath, and let that go and enter into it from a place of nothingness. What is there for the other person? I wrote something else down. Let me see if I can remember. Nope, I got it all. Okay, so I'm just going to be making the rest of this up. This is like something that, as I was saying at the end of the last class, this is something that we practice over and over in class. I termed them micro forgivenesses. When your partner accidentally, bumps you or punches you a little bit harder than you wanted to be, or they don't throw you quite the right way, or they're just, taking their time and not being able to figure it out, and you're able to just forgive them in that moment. And I think you guys have had this experience too, where it's a lot easier to do it in the dojo, because while we are still oftentimes, kind of acting from a shade of the ego, it's not as much as we normally are, and neither is anybody else. So a lot of people in here are also kind of trying to connect to that higher place. And thus, when something happens, it's like we're a little bit readier to just let it go. And it's especially easier if it's something very small, if it's something that you can tell like they didn't really mean to do it. But we practice letting that go immediately. And it is so important in class, because if we don't let that go and we're holding on to it, that means that we're dragging it into the next moment. And in the next moment, that's when something dangerous could happen. If I'm still thinking about how my partner just hit me a little bit harder than they wanted to, and now my mind is there, well, then I'm not there to defend against the next punch. Or I'm not there to pay attention to my own punch, which might hit my partner a little bit too hard. And this is kind of like, when I say forgiveness is for ourselves, I mean also we need to learn to forgive ourselves. And when you can do that, then in the moment, like let's say that you messed up. You're in class faced in the mirror, and I walk in front of you and you throw something that doesn't look anything like what we're supposed to be throwing. And then you get up in your head and you go, oh my God, I am so bad and I look so dumb just now. Sifu saw that. And again, you're up in your own head about this. There's nobody else really involved except you. But you're still kind of holding on to that. In that moment, you practice forgiving yourself in the same way that you practice forgiving somebody else. In that moment, you move on. You move on to the next thing, to the next count, to the next moment. And the more we practice that, the easier it becomes. The easier it just becomes the natural thing that we do out in the rest of the world as well. This is a big part of what we practice, is taking things that start off as a concept. It starts off as an idea of something that I want to do. It's an ideal. It's the way that I want to be. And it might simply be like, when somebody throws a punch at me, instead of doing this, which is what I did before I started learning martial arts, then I do the ideal, which is to move out of the way. Well, until I practice that over and over and over again, it's still very difficult to do. And I'll still get hit in the head, or I'll still close my eyes or whatever, until I've practiced enough times that it becomes automatic. And so when we practice forgiveness, we're rewiring our minds to make that be the first thing that we think of. The first automatic response is, okay, I let this go. And if you can take a step back and imagine what life would be like if you didn't hold on to any of those things that you could just instantly forgive, I'm pretty sure you'll see that it's a very different way of existing. And the biggest things, the things that are the hardest to let go of, the things that are the hardest to forgive, are oftentimes the things that we need to forgive the quickest. Because it's like if if you're standing on a hill and you've got this boulder that's rolling down the hill, or you think of it, it's a snowball, but the snowball is going to kill you if it hits you. It starts off at the top, and the further you let it go down, the bigger it gets and the more dangerous it gets. So the best place to be is right up next to it. So before that boulder picks up speed, you just stop it, right? It's the same thing with forgiveness. And if this thing is really big, if this boulder is gigantic, absolutely unmovable except by the gravity that's about to crush us with, that's when it's the most important to have your hand right up against it so that you can just stop it from gaining any momentum, so that you can just move out of the way and let it go. And oftentimes, the reason that it becomes so big and so painful and so impossible to let go of is because what we turn it into in our own minds. And it's the time, it's all the energy, it's all the attachment to it, it's all that stuff that we pour into it that causes it to be so big and so impossible. But if it happens and just like that, we let it go, it never has that opportunity. It never really gets that power over us. So I think that being able to forgive instantly is so important. And to be able to forgive ourselves, so important. I think that we talk to ourselves, we put ourselves through things that we would never let anybody else put ourselves through. We have these thoughts that we keep going back to in our heads, these negative things, this self-talk that I know for me, for many years of my life, and some still lasting effects of this. Like I think about the dumb stuff that I did when I was a kid, and it was fairly minor, but kind of was built up in my head over the years, and I would still look back on it and I think, I can't believe I said that. I looked so stupid, and I can't believe this person probably still thinks this way of me. That person probably forgot it so many years ago, but it's still like in there. And if we can do that for ourselves, then we'll probably recognize that actually the other person has already forgiven us. And if we can forgive ourselves for the things that we've done to ourselves, it's just gone, it disappears. It's a puff of smoke. So we get to practice in the dojo, but we want to be able to take this outside of the dojo. We want to practice having the same kind of attitude towards forgiveness that we do towards each other in practice, and use that with the other people in our lives. And oftentimes it's the people that we're the closest to, the people that, whose opinions we care about the most, the people who really are a big part of our lives, that we have a hard time forgiving for those things. And it doesn't matter if it's that person or it's somebody else who we saw once and we never saw again. We still want to be able to practice that with them. So this is one of my favorite exercises, is just when I'm out there in the rest of the world, I treat everybody like they're a student, like that I'm practicing with. And whatever they do, I start assuming that they have my best interests at heart, that they are acting from a place of as close to being ego-free as possible, that they're coming from a place of, I'm trying to be a great partner. And when I assume that, it makes it pretty easy to let it go right away. When I assume that this person is a jerk, and that this person is trying to do this to me, that this person has nefarious intentions and emotion behind this, then it's almost impossible. But that's because my boat has somebody inside of it, and their boat has somebody inside of it, and the only way that it can turn is full-on war. So at least you can empty your own boat, even though that's very difficult. You can, once you get it, you can always do that. And then even if the other person, they're fully invested in with the ego in this moment, you can still pretend that there's nobody in that boat over there. And when we meditate, that's what it's all about on some levels, getting back to that place of emptiness. So as you sit and meditate, you might find yourself going back over your day and thinking about all the stupid stuff that you did. and you can just forgive yourself immediately. You might find yourself thinking about, oh, there's this situation that I have to deal with this other person. You can just forgive them right now in this meditation. You don't even have to talk to them to do it. You can just, in that moment, okay, I recognize the futility of holding on to this. I'm just going to let it go. And just that constant exercise of going back to stillness, going back to the breath, going back to that empty state. That's where we want to be. That's where we want to act from. And that's when we're going to make the best decisions, have the most positive effect in those conversations. So let's practice that now. Sit.